The sound of gunfire echoed across the dusty plains as Clara Quinn ducked behind an overturned wagon, her heart pounding against her ribs. It was supposed to be a routine journey from Santa Fe to Paso Robles, California, but the stagecoach robbery had changed everything. Now, in the summer of 1876, she found herself stranded in the middle of nowhere with nothing but her medical bag and the clothes on her back. Clara had never imagined that her journey west to establish her medical practice would begin like this. Her father, a respected physician in Boston, had reluctantly supported her unconventional ambition, but now she wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. The California gold rush had long since ended, but the promise of a growing town in need of a doctor had drawn her to Paso Robles. The gunfire ceased, and Clara peered cautiously around the edge of the wagon. The bandits had disappeared, taking with them the stagecoach, the horses, and all the passengers' belongings. Only Clara had managed to escape during the chaos, grabbing her precious medical bag before diving into a ravine. Night was falling quickly across the open landscape, and Clara knew she needed to find shelter. According to the driver, they had been about 15 miles from the next town when the attack happened. With no other option, she began walking, following the rutted trail westward. Hours later, exhausted and parched, Clara spotted a faint light in the distance. Hope surged through her as she quickened her pace. As she drew closer, she could make out the silhouette of a modest ranch house against the starlit sky. A small barn stood nearby, and the soft nickering of horses drifted toward her on the night breeze. She approached cautiously, aware that strangers weren't always welcome in these parts. The door to the house opened before she could knock, and a tall figure stood framed in the doorway, the glow of a lamp casting long shadows across the porch. "State your business," a deep voice commanded, and Clara could see the glint of a rifle barrel in the man's hands. "Please," she said, her throat dry with thirst. "I mean no harm. I was a passenger on the afternoon stagecoach to Paso Robles. We were robbed, and I'm the only one who got away. I'm a doctor, seeking shelter for the night." There was a moment of silence. Then the man lowered his weapon. "A female doctor? That's a new one." Despite his skepticism, he stepped aside. "Come in, then. Can't leave you out here for the coyotes." Clara stepped into the warmth of the small ranch house. The interior was simple but clean, with a stone fireplace, a wooden table with 4 chairs, and modest furnishings that spoke of a practical, no-nonsense lifestyle. "Colton Quinn," the man said, extending a calloused hand. "This is my ranch, such as it is." Clara took his hand, noting the strength in his grip. "Clara Quinn. No relation, I assume?" she added with a tired smile. He was younger than she had first thought, perhaps in his late 20s, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at the collar of his worn shirt. "No relation that I know of," he replied, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. "Are you hurt, Miss Quinn?" "Dr. Quinn," she corrected gently. "And no, I'm not injured, just thirsty and tired." Colton nodded, gesturing toward a chair. "Sit, I'll fetch you some water." He moved to a bucket near the hearth, dipping a ladle and filling a tin cup, which he handed to her. Clara drank gratefully, the cool water soothing her parched throat. "Thank you, Mr. Quinn. Just Quinn is fine. Most folks around here don't stand on formality." He sat across from her, studying her with undisguised curiosity. "So you're really a doctor?" "I am," she replied, straightening her shoulders. "I graduated from the Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania last year. I was on my way to Paso Robles to establish my practice." "Paso Robles is still about 30 miles west," Quinn said. "Not much between here and there except my ranch and a few others." He paused, frowning slightly. Did the others on the stagecoach? Are they? They're alive, Clara assured him. The bandits took them and the coach. I happened to be near the door when the shooting started and managed to slip away in the confusion. Quinn nodded, relief evident in his expression. Likely they'll be released once they're relieved of their valuables. The Blackwell gang doesn't usually kill if they don't have to. The Blackwell gang? Clara asked, alarmed. Band of outlaws that's been causing trouble in these parts for the past year or so. Sheriff in Paso Robles has a posse out looking for them, but they know the terrain better than most. Quinn stood, moving to the stove where a pot simmered. Are you hungry? It's just beans and bacon, but it's hot. That sounds wonderful, Clara admitted, suddenly aware of how long it had been since she'd eaten. As Quinn prepared 2 plates of food, Clara noticed a photograph on the mantel, a woman with a young boy, perhaps 7 or 8 years old. Your family? She asked. Quinn glanced over his shoulder. My sister and her boy, Joshua. They live here with me, but they're visiting her friend in Paso Robles. They're due back tomorrow. He placed a steaming plate in front of her. Been running this ranch since our parents passed 5 years ago. It's not much, but it's ours. Clara ate hungrily, the simple food tasting better than any fancy dinner she'd had in Boston. This is delicious, thank you. Quinn watched her for a moment, then asked, what made a Boston lady decide to come all the way out here to doctor people? Plenty of need for doctors back east, I reckon. Clara set down her fork, considering her answer. I wanted to go somewhere my skills were truly needed, where I could make a difference. In Boston, I would have been just another doctor, and a female one at that, which many still view with suspicion. Out here, I thought people might be more concerned with whether I could help them than with whether a woman should be practicing medicine. Fair enough, Quinn said with a nod. Folks around here tend to judge you more on what you can do than who you are. Still, it won't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is, Clara replied. After dinner, Quinn showed her to a small bedroom. My sister's room, he explained. She won't mind you using it for the night. Clara thanked him and closed the door, grateful for the sanctuary after her harrowing day. She fell asleep almost instantly, exhausted from her ordeal. The sound of a child's cry woke her shortly after dawn. Clara sat up, disoriented for a moment before remembering where she was. The cry came again, followed by a man's voice, Quinn's, speaking in low, comforting tones. Quickly, Clara dressed and hurried out to the main room of the house. The front door stood open, and through it, she could see Quinn kneeling beside a small boy who clutched his arm, tears streaming down his dirty face. What happened? Clara asked, hurrying toward them. Quinn looked up, his expression a mixture of surprise and relief. Doc, thank goodness. This is my nephew, Joshua. He fell from his horse. Clara knelt beside the boy, who looked to be about 8 years old, with the same dark hair and blue eyes as his uncle. Hello, Joshua. I'm Dr. Quinn. May I look at your arm? The boy nodded through his tears, and Clara gently examined the limb. The forearm was clearly broken, with an unnatural angle that made her wince in sympathy. Where's my mama? Joshua asked, his voice small with pain. She's on her way, buddy, Quinn assured him, his hand gentle on the boy's shoulder. She was just behind you on the trail. You shouldn't have raced ahead like that. As if summoned by his words, a woman appeared on horseback, galloping toward the ranch house. She dismounted in a flurry of skirts and rushed to her son's side. Joshua, what happened? She demanded, dropping to her knees beside him. He fell from his horse, Grace, Quinn explained. Arms broken, but Dr. Quinn here says she can help. Grace looked at Clara with surprise, taking in her appearance with a quick glance. Doctor, Clara Quinn. Clara introduced herself with a nod. I'm a physician. I was on the stagecoach that was robbed yesterday, and your brother kindly offered me shelter for the night. Grace's expression softened slightly. Well, we're grateful you're here now. Can you help my boy? I can, Clara assured her, reaching for her medical bag that she'd brought from the house. But we need to get him inside where I can work properly. Quinn lifted Joshua carefully, carrying him into the house while Clara and Grace followed. He laid the boy on the kitchen table as Clara directed, then stepped back to give her room to work. Clara spoke softly to Joshua as she examined his arm more thoroughly, explaining what she was doing and praising his bravery. This is a clean break, she told him and his mother. It will heal well if we set it properly and keep it immobilized. She prepared a mixture of herbs from her bag, steeped in hot water, to help with the pain, and had the boy drink it. While they waited for the medicine to take effect, she instructed Quinn to find straight pieces of wood for splints and Grace to tear some clean sheets into strips. When Joshua's expression became drowsy and his pain seemed lessened, Clara took a deep breath and carefully manipulated the broken bones back into alignment. The boy whimpered but did not cry out, and Clara worked quickly, applying the wooden splints and wrapping the arm securely with the strips of fabric. The cowboy's boy had a broken arm, she said with a reassuring smile as she finished her work. She wrapped it tight and said, "He'll heal just fine." She looked up at Grace, who hovered anxiously nearby. "And he will. Children's bones heal remarkably well. In 6 to 8 weeks, he'll be good as new, though he'll need to be careful until then." Grace's eyes filled with tears of relief. "Thank you, doctor. We're a 3-day ride from the nearest physician in Paso Robles. If you hadn't been here." "But I was," Clara said simply, packing away her supplies. "And now you know what to do if it happens again, though I sincerely hope it doesn't." Quinn, who had watched the entire procedure with intense focus, asked, "How did you learn to do that so well?" "Medical school and then a year working in a charity hospital in Philadelphia," Clara replied. "We saw many broken bones there, especially among the children." Grace insisted that Clara join them for breakfast, and as they ate, Quinn asked about her plans. "I still intend to reach Paso Robles," Clara said. "I've arranged to purchase a small house there that I can use as both home and office." "I'll take you," Quinn offered immediately. "It's the least I can do after what you've done for Joshua. We can leave after breakfast, be there by nightfall." Clara accepted gratefully, and once the meal was cleared away, she checked on Joshua once more before preparing to leave. The boy was resting comfortably on a pallet near the fireplace, the effects of the herbal remedy still making him drowsy. "Remember," Clara instructed Grace, "keep the arm elevated when he's lying down, and make sure he doesn't try to use it. I've left some willow bark for the pain. Brew it as tea if he needs it." Grace nodded, embracing Clara impulsively. "We can't thank you enough, Dr. Quinn." "Clara, please," she insisted, returning the embrace. Quinn had saddled 2 horses, and he helped Clara mount a gentle mare with a lady's side saddle. Her medical bag was secured behind her, and a blanket roll that Grace had insisted she take was tied behind Quinn's saddle. They set off at a steady pace, Quinn leading the way along a trail that wound through rolling grasslands dotted with oak trees. The summer sun beat down upon them, but a pleasant breeze made the journey bearable. "Your sister seems like a remarkable woman," Clara commented as they rode. Quinn nodded, pride evident in his expression. "She is. Her husband died in a mining accident 3 years ago. She came home to the ranch with Joshua, and we've been making a go of it together since then." "And you never married?" Clara asked, then immediately regretted the personal nature of the question. "Forgive me, that's none of my business." Quinn didn't seem offended. "Never found the right woman, I suppose. Ranching doesn't leave much time for courting, and there aren't many eligible ladies in these parts anyway." He glanced at her with a hint of amusement. "What about you, Doc? No husband back in Boston?" Clara shook her head. "Most men aren't interested in a wife who's also a doctor. The few who expressed interest wanted me to give up medicine once we were married, which I couldn't do." "Their loss?" Quinn remarked simply, and Clara felt a surprising warmth spread through her at his words. They stopped at midday to rest the horses and eat the lunch Grace had packed for them: bread, cheese, and dried apples. Seated in the shade of a large oak tree, they talked easily about Quinn's ranch, Clara's medical training, and their respective childhoods, his on the frontier and hers in civilized Boston. "Did you always want to be a rancher?" Clara asked as they prepared to resume their journey. Quinn considered the question as he tightened his horse's cinch. "Not always. When I was a boy, I thought I might become a lawyer. I liked reading and had a knack for argument, according to my father." He smiled at the memory. "But when he fell ill, I had to take over the ranch. By the time he passed, I'd found I had a talent for it. There's a satisfaction in working the land, in seeing things grow and thrive under your care." Clara nodded, understanding. "That's not so different from medicine, in a way." They rode on, the landscape gradually changing as they approached Paso Robles. The rolling grasslands gave way to more varied terrain, with vineyards beginning to appear alongside cattle ranches. By late afternoon, they could see the town in the distance, nestled in a valley with hot springs that had given the settlement its name, Pass of the Oaks in Spanish. "It's beautiful," Clara murmured, taking in the sight. "It is," Quinn agreed. "Growing fast, too. The springs draw people seeking cures for their ailments. Might be good for your practice." As they rode into town, Clara was struck by the mixture of elegance and frontier ruggedness. Paso Robles had begun as a simple stagecoach stop but had grown into a respectable town with a main street lined with wooden sidewalks and an assortment of businesses: a hotel, a general store, a bank, a saloon, and various other establishments. Some of the buildings were quite handsome, with false fronts and painted trim, while others were more utilitarian. Quinn guided her to a modest white clapboard house at the edge of town. "This it?" he asked, reining in his horse. Clara nodded, a surge of emotion rising in her throat as she gazed at what would be her new home and medical office. "This is it." They dismounted, and Quinn tied the horses to the hitching post in front of the house. Clara approached the door with a mixture of excitement and trepidation, retrieving a key from her medical bag, the one item the bandits hadn't managed to steal. The interior was dusty but well-built, with a front room that would serve as her waiting area, a larger room behind it for examinations, and living quarters at the back: a kitchen, a small bedroom, and a tiny parlor. It was simple but perfect for her needs. "It's wonderful," she said, turning to Quinn with a smile. "Needs some work?" he observed, eyeing a crack in one window and the layer of dust that covered everything. "But nothing that can't be fixed." "I can manage," Clara assured him, though the reality of starting her new life alone in this unfamiliar place suddenly seemed daunting. Quinn seemed to read her thoughts. "Tell you what, document. I'll fetch the sheriff, let him know you're here and what happened with the stagecoach. Then I'll see about getting you some supplies to tide you over until you can properly stock your pantry." Clara's protest died on her lips as she realized the practicality of his offer. "Thank you," she said instead. "That would be most helpful." Quinn returned an hour later with the sheriff, a grizzled man named Harker who took her statement about the robbery, promising to do what he could to recover her belongings, though he wasn't optimistic. He also welcomed her to Paso Robles, mentioning that the town had been without a doctor since old Doc Miller had passed away 6 months earlier. After the sheriff left, Quinn helped Clara clean the front room and kitchen, then unpacked the supplies he'd purchased: flour, coffee, sugar, beans, salt pork, and a few other essentials. He also brought a newspaper which had a notice about the stagecoach robbery on the front page. Your fellow passengers are safe, he told her, pointing to the article. They were released about 10 miles from where you were robbed, just as I suspected. Made their way to town on foot yesterday evening. Clara sighed with relief. Thank goodness. I've been worried about them. As dusk fell, Quinn reluctantly prepared to leave. I should head back. Grace and Joshua will be worried if I'm not home by morning. Clara walked him to the door, suddenly reluctant to see him go. I can't thank you enough for everything, Quinn. He shifted his hat in his hands, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. It was my pleasure, document, if you need anything. He hesitated, then continued. Grace and Joshua would love to see you again, to check how he's healing. Maybe you could ride out to the ranch in a week or two. I could come fetch you if you'd like. I'd like that, Clara replied, surprised by how much she meant it. Quinn nodded, settling his hat on his head. Good then. I'll see you in a fortnight, if not before. He touched the brim of his hat in a small salute, then turned and mounted his horse, raising a hand in farewell as he rode away. Clara stood in the doorway until his figure disappeared into the gathering darkness, wondering at the strange emptiness she felt at his departure. Shaking herself, she went back inside to continue making her new house into a home. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity for Clara. Word spread quickly that a new doctor had arrived in Paso Robles, and patients began appearing at her door almost immediately. Most were initially curious about a female physician, but Clara's competence and compassion soon won them over. She treated everything from minor injuries to chronic ailments, delivered a baby, extracted 3 teeth, and set another broken bone, this time the wrist of a blacksmith who had been kicked by a horse he was shoeing. By the end of her first week, she had established a reputation as a skilled and caring doctor, and her initial anxiety about being accepted had largely dissipated. Clara also made friends among the townspeople. Gertrude Vance, the widow who ran the town's only proper restaurant, took a particular liking to her and often sent over meals when Clara was too busy to cook. The two women, despite their difference in age, Gertrude being in her 50s, found they shared a similar sense of humor and a love of reading. You know, Gertrude remarked one evening as they shared tea in Clara's parlor, that Colton Quinn has been asking about you whenever he comes to town. Clara felt her cheeks warm. He's probably just concerned about his nephew's arm. I promised to check on the boy's progress. Gertrude raised an eyebrow. And I suppose that's why he's been making excuses to come into town twice a week instead of his usual monthly visit? To ask about his nephew's arm that you've never even seen again. Clara busied herself with pouring more tea, unwilling to admit even to herself how often her thoughts had turned to the quiet rancher. He's simply being neighborly. If you say so, dear, Gertrude replied with a knowing smile. But I've known Colton Quinn since he was in short pants, and I've never seen him being neighborly quite so diligently before. Before Clara could form a response, a frantic knocking came at her door. Setting aside her teacup, she hurried to answer it, finding a breathless young boy on her doorstep. Dr. Quinn, please come quick, he gasped. There's been an accident at the mill. Mr. Daniels got his arm caught in the machinery. Clara grabbed her medical bag, apologizing hastily to Gertrude, who waved her off with an understanding nod. Go, dear. We'll finish our conversation another time. The injury at the mill was severe but not life-threatening. Clara worked for hours to clean and stitch the deep lacerations in the miller's arm, grateful that no amputation was necessary. It was past midnight when she finally returned home, exhausted but satisfied with her work. As promised, Quinn arrived 2 weeks after their parting, riding up to her house just as Clara was finishing breakfast. She felt a flutter of excitement at the sight of him dismounting from his horse, and chided herself for the schoolgirl reaction. "Morning, Doc," he greeted her, removing his hat as she opened the door. "Hope I'm not disturbing you too early." "Not at all," Clara assured him, gesturing for him to enter. "I was just finishing breakfast. Would you like some coffee?" Quinn accepted the offer, and they sat at her small kitchen table, the morning sunlight streaming through the window casting a warm glow across the room. "How are you settling in?" he asked, his blue eyes studying her with what seemed like genuine interest. "Very well," Clara replied. "The people here have been wonderfully welcoming. I've been busier than I expected." Quinn nodded, a hint of pride in his expression. "Told you there was need for a doctor here." He paused, taking a sip of coffee before continuing. "Grace was hoping you might come check on Joshua's arm. It's healing well, from what we can tell, but she'd feel better having your opinion." "I'd be happy to," Clara said. "I can close the office for a day." "When would be convenient?" They arranged for her to accompany him back to the ranch that same day. Clara left a note on her door directing any patients with emergencies to find her at the Quinn Ranch, then changed into a riding habit more suitable for the journey. The ride back to the ranch was even more pleasant than their first journey together. Quinn seemed more relaxed, telling her about the town's history and pointing out landmarks along the way. Clara found herself laughing at his dry observations and enjoying his company more than she had expected. When they arrived at the ranch, Grace greeted them warmly, ushering Clara inside where Joshua sat at the table, his splinted arm resting carefully before him. "Dr. Quinn!" the boy exclaimed, his face lighting up. "Look, my arm doesn't hurt hardly at all anymore." Clara smiled, kneeling beside him to examine the limb. "That's excellent news, Joshua. Let me have a look and see how it's healing." She carefully unwrapped the splint, noting with approval that Grace had kept the bandages clean and followed her instructions. The arm was still swollen but less so than before, and when she gently palpated the break site, she could feel that the bones were knitting properly. "You've done a wonderful job caring for it," Clara told Grace. "The break is healing nicely. I'll rewrap it, and he should continue to wear the splint for another 4 weeks. But everything looks perfect." Relief washed over Grace's face. "Thank God, and thank you, Clara. I've been so worried, even though he hasn't complained much." "He's a brave young man," Clara said, smiling at Joshua as she reapplied the splint with fresh bandages. "And you're a wonderful mother. Between the two of you, this arm will be good as new before you know it." Grace insisted that Clara stay for dinner, and Quinn added his encouragement. "No sense heading back to town so late in the day. You can have Grace's room again, and we'll ride back in the morning." Clara found herself easily agreeing, drawn by the warm atmosphere of the Quinn household and, though she was reluctant to admit it, the opportunity to spend more time with Colton Quinn. After dinner, while Grace put Joshua to bed, Quinn invited Clara to join him on the porch. The evening was mild, with a canopy of stars spreading across the dark sky. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the chirping of crickets and the occasional distant howl of a coyote. "I've always loved the night sky out here," Quinn said finally, his voice soft. "In town, the buildings and lamps block some of it, but here, you can see everything." Clara followed his gaze upward, marveling at the brilliance of the stars. "It's beautiful. In Boston, the city lights and smoke obscure most of the stars. I never knew there could be so many." "One of the compensations for the hardships of ranch life," Quinn remarked with a small smile. Then, after another moment of silence, he asked, "Are you happy here, Clara? In Paso Robles, I mean." The question surprised her, both for its directness and for his use of her first name. "I am," she replied honestly. "More than I expected to be. The work is challenging but rewarding, and the people." She glanced at him. "The people have been kind." Quinn nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I'm glad. We're lucky to have you. Something in his tone made Clara's heart beat a little faster. Even though I'm a woman doctor? Because you're a good doctor, Quinn corrected, turning to face her. The moonlight cast shadows across his features, but she could see the earnestness in his eyes. Your being a woman doesn't change that. Clara felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the mild evening air. Thank you, Colton. That means more than you know. The use of his given name seemed to please him, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. They talked a while longer about her patients, his ranch, and the upcoming harvest festival in town. When Clara finally yawned, unable to help herself after the long day, Quinn insisted she get some rest. I'll see you in the morning, he said, rising from his chair. Sleep well, Clara. The following day, after a hearty breakfast and final instructions for Joshua's care, Clara and Quinn set out for Paso Robles once more. The journey seemed to pass too quickly, and Clara found herself wishing they had further to travel when the town came into view. Will you come to the Harvest Festival next weekend? Quinn asked as they approached her house. The whole town turns out for it. Dancing, food, games for the children. It's quite an event. I'd love to, Clara replied, though I don't know many people yet. You know me, Quinn pointed out with a small smile. And Grace and Joshua will be there. Grace has been making preserves for weeks to enter in the competition. Clara returned his smile. Then I shall certainly attend. As Quinn helped her dismount in front of her house, his hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary, and Clara felt a flutter of something like anticipation in her chest. He promised to see her at the festival, then rode away, leaving her with a curious mixture of emotions she wasn't quite ready to examine too closely. The week leading up to the Harvest Festival was particularly busy for Clara. A minor epidemic of influenza swept through the town, keeping her occupied with house calls and patients coming to her office. By the time Saturday arrived, she was exhausted but determined to attend the festivities. The town square had been transformed with bunting, lanterns, and stalls selling everything from homemade preserves to handcrafted furniture. A platform had been erected for dancing, and a small band was playing lively tunes that had several couples already whirling about. Clara wore one of her few non-working dresses, a blue cotton with white trim that brought out the color of her eyes. She had pinned her hair up more carefully than usual and even added a touch of rose water, though she told herself it was simply to mark the special occasion. She had barely entered the square when Gertrude Vance spotted her, waving enthusiastically. Clara, dear, over here. We've saved you a place at our table. Clara joined Gertrude and several other women she had met over the past weeks, accepting a plate of food and a cup of lemonade. She found herself scanning the crowd, looking for a certain tall rancher and his family. If you're looking for Colton Quinn, Gertrude murmured close to her ear. He's over by the judging table with Grace. Her blackberry preserves won first prize. Clara felt her cheeks warm at being so transparent. I was merely taking in the whole festival, she protested weakly. Gertrude patted her hand with maternal affection. Of course you were, dear. But now that you know where he is, perhaps you'd like to offer your congratulations to Grace. Unable to deny her interest any longer, at least to herself, Clara excused herself and made her way through the crowd toward the judging table. She spotted Quinn first, his height making him stand out among the gathered townspeople. He was laughing at something Grace had said, his head thrown back in genuine amusement, and Clara felt her heart skip a beat at the sight. Then he turned, as if sensing her presence, and his eyes found hers across the crowd. His smile softened, becoming something more personal, and he raised a hand in greeting. Clara returned the gesture, weaving her way toward them. Congratulations on your prize, she said to Grace, who beamed with pride as she displayed her blue ribbon. Thank you. It's the first time I've won first place. Usually Mrs. Peterson takes the ribbon, but she's visiting her daughter in Sacramento this year. Still an honest victory, Quinn insisted, giving his sister an affectionate nudge. Your preserves are the best in the county, and now everyone knows it. Joshua appeared, tugging at Clara's skirt with his good hand. Dr. Quinn, did you see my arm? It doesn't hurt at all now. Clara smiled down at him. That's wonderful news, Joshua. You've been taking excellent care of it. The boy nodded enthusiastically. Uncle Colton says I can help with the gentle horses again next week if you say it's all right. Clara glanced at Quinn, who raised an eyebrow in question. As long as he's careful and doesn't use the arm too much, I don't see why not, she agreed. Light duties only, though. Joshua whooped with excitement and ran off to tell his friends the good news, leaving the adults smiling after him. Would you like to dance, Clara? Quinn asked suddenly, gesturing toward the platform where couples were still twirling to the music. Clara hesitated only briefly before nodding. I'd be delighted, though I should warn you it's been some time since I've danced. That makes two of us, Quinn admitted with a wry smile. We can relearn together. He led her to the platform, placing one hand respectfully at her waist while taking her hand with the other. The band was playing a waltz, and after a moment of adjustment, they found their rhythm, moving together as if they had danced many times before. You're quite good at this for someone who's out of practice, Clara observed, surprised by his grace. Quinn's eyes twinkled with amusement. My mother insisted all her children learn proper dancing. Said it was a civilized skill that even ranchers ought to have. A wise woman, Clara remarked, enjoying the feel of his hand at her waist, the scent of soap and sunshine that seemed to cling to him. Quinn agreed, a flicker of sadness crossing his features before he smiled again. She would have liked you, I think. The simple statement warmed Clara more than she would have expected. They danced 2 more dances before taking a break, Quinn fetching them both cups of lemonade as they stood at the edge of the square, watching the festivities. I'm glad you came to Paso Robles, Quinn said suddenly, his voice low enough that only she could hear. I didn't know we needed a doctor as much as we did until you arrived. Clara looked up at him, sensing that he meant more than his words conveyed. I'm glad I came too, she replied softly. It already feels more like home than Boston ever did. Quinn held her gaze for a long moment, and Clara felt the world around them fade away, the noise and music becoming a distant hum. Then Joshua appeared again, tugging at his uncle's arm, breaking the moment. Uncle Colton, they're starting the sack races. You promised you'd watch me. Quinn smiled down at his nephew. So I did. Would you like to watch too, Clara? The 3 of them moved to the edge of a cleared area where children were lining up with burlap sacks. Despite his splinted arm, Joshua was determined to participate, and after a brief consultation with Quinn, Clara agreed he could try if he promised to be careful. They cheered him on as he hopped awkwardly down the course, coming in last but finishing with a triumphant grin that made the position irrelevant. When he rejoined them, Quinn ruffled his hair with obvious pride. Well done, Joshua. You showed real determination. The boy beamed, then looked up at Clara with hopeful eyes. Will you come have Sunday dinner with us tomorrow, Dr. Quinn? Mama's making her special chicken pie. Clara glanced at Quinn, who added, We'd all like that very much, if you're not too busy. I'd be delighted, Clara replied, touched by the invitation and the genuine warmth behind it. The remainder of the festival passed in a pleasant blur of games, food, and conversation. As darkness fell, lanterns were lit, casting a golden glow over the square. The band played slower, more romantic tunes, and when Quinn asked her to dance again, Clara went willingly into his arms. This has been a wonderful day, she murmured as they swayed together under the stars. The first of many, I hope, Quinn replied, his voice carrying a question that made Clara's heart beat faster. When the festival finally wound down, Quinn insisted on escorting Clara home. They walked in comfortable silence, her hand resting lightly on his arm. At her door, Clara turned to thank him for the evening. I'll see you tomorrow, Quinn said, hesitating as if wanting to say more but uncertain how to proceed. Clara gathered her courage. I'm looking forward to it, Colton. He smiled then, a full, genuine smile that transformed his features and made her breath catch. Good night, Clara, he said softly, touching the brim of his hat before turning to leave. Clara watched him go, a sense of anticipation filling her at the thought of seeing him again so soon. For the first time since arriving in Paso Robles, she felt as if she had found not just a place to practice medicine, but a place where she truly belonged. Sunday dinner at the Quinn Ranch became a regular occurrence over the next few months. Clara would ride out after her morning appointments, sometimes accompanied by Quinn if he happened to be in town, other times making the journey alone on a gentle mare he had helped her purchase. These afternoons were filled with laughter, good food, and increasingly, moments when Clara would catch Quinn watching her with an expression that made her heart race. They would often walk together after dinner, wandering through the pastures or sitting by the small creek that ran through the property, talking about everything and nothing. As autumn progressed into winter, Clara's practice continued to flourish. The townspeople had fully embraced her as their physician, and she found herself deeply invested in their lives and well-being. Joshua's arm healed perfectly, the splint removed after 8 weeks with only a slight tenderness remaining that soon disappeared. It was during one of their Sunday walks, with the December air crisp and cool around them, that Quinn finally spoke of what had been growing between them. Clara, he began, stopping beneath an old oak tree, its branches bare against the winter sky. I've never been one for fancy words or speeches, but I need to tell you something. Clara looked up at him, her breath forming small clouds in the cold air. Yes, Colton? He took her gloved hands in his expression more serious than she had ever seen it. When you came to Paso Robles, I thought you were just passing through our lives, a doctor who happened to be in the right place at the right time for Joshua. But these past months... He paused, seeming to search for the right words. These past months have shown me that your arrival was more than coincidence. It was the beginning of something I never expected to find. Clara's heart pounded in her chest as she waited for him to continue. I love you, Clara Quinn, he said simply, his blue eyes never leaving hers. I love your strength, your compassion, your determination. I love the way you care for your patients, the way you've become part of this community, part of our family. And if you feel anything similar for me, I'd be honored to court you properly, with the intention of making you my wife someday if that's what you want. Tears pricked at Clara's eyes, emotion welling up so strongly that for a moment she couldn't speak. Then she squeezed his hands, a smile breaking across her face. I love you too, Colton. I have for some time now. The joy that lit his features was answer enough, but he pulled her gently closer, one hand coming up to cup her cheek. May I kiss you, Clara? He asked, his voice husky. She nodded, and his lips met hers in a kiss that was tender and reverent, a promise of things to come. When they parted, Clara felt as if her heart might burst with happiness. Grace will be pleased, Quinn remarked with a chuckle. She's been dropping hints for months. Clara laughed, remembering the knowing looks and subtle comments from his sister. Gertrude as well. I think half the town has been waiting for this. They walked back to the ranch hand in hand, their breath mingling in the cold air, the future stretching before them full of promise. The courtship that followed was traditional but not prolonged. Quinn would call on Clara in town, taking her to dinner at Gertrude's restaurant or accompanying her on her rounds when a patient lived far from town. Clara continued her Sunday visits to the ranch, now openly acknowledged as Quinn's intended. Their engagement was announced at the Christmas Eve gathering in the town square, to the surprise of no one and the delight of everyone. Grace hugged Clara fiercely, whispering, "I've always wanted a sister," while Joshua proclaimed excitedly that now Dr. Quinn would be Dr. Quinn for real. The wedding was set for early spring, a time of renewal that seemed fitting for their new beginning together. Clara wrote to her father in Boston, inviting him to attend and sharing her happiness. His response was warm and supportive, promising to make the journey west to give her away. As winter gave way to spring, preparations for the wedding occupied much of Clara's free time. Grace and Gertrude took charge of many of the arrangements, insisting that Clara continue her medical practice without interruption. Quinn, meanwhile, was adding a new wing to the ranch house, a proper office where Clara could see patients who lived too far from town to make the journey easily. "You're building me an office?" Clara asked in surprise when he showed her the plans one Sunday afternoon. Quinn nodded, a hint of uncertainty in his expression. "I thought you might want to continue your practice after we're married. The ranch is too far from town for you to travel back and forth each day, but this way you could still see patients who need you." Clara was deeply touched by his understanding and support. "It's perfect, Colton. Exactly what I would have wanted but didn't know how to ask for." He smiled, relief evident in his eyes. "I never want you to give up the work you love, Clara. It's part of who you are, and I love every part of you." The day of their wedding dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect spring morning that seemed created especially for such an occasion. The ceremony was held in the town's small church, filled to capacity with townspeople who had come to respect Clara as their doctor and Quinn as one of the area's most reliable ranchers. Clara's father, a distinguished gentleman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes so like his daughter's, gave her away with visible pride and a whispered, "He's a good man, Clara. I can see it in his eyes." The couple exchanged simple, heartfelt vows, promising to love and support each other through whatever life might bring. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Quinn kissed his bride with a tenderness that brought tears to many eyes in the congregation. The celebration afterward was held in the town square, with tables laden with food contributed by nearly every household in Paso Robles. There was dancing and laughter, toasts and well wishes, and through it all, Quinn kept Clara close, his hand rarely leaving hers as if he couldn't quite believe his good fortune. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the festivities, Quinn led Clara away from the crowd, toward where their horses waited to take them back to the ranch, their home now. "Happy, Mrs. Quinn?" he asked softly, helping her mount. Clara looked down at him, her heart full to bursting. "More than I ever dreamed possible, Mr. Quinn." They rode home together, the future stretching before them like the open land around Paso Robles, full of promise, challenge, and most of all, love that had begun with a broken arm and a doctor's reassurance that everything would heal just fine. In the years that followed, Clara and Colton Quinn built a life together that balanced his ranching and her medical practice. The office he had built for her became known throughout the region, drawing patients from far and wide who sought her skilled and compassionate care. 2 years after their wedding, Clara gave birth to their first child, a son they named James after Colton's father. Joshua, now 12, took his role as cousin and honorary big brother very seriously, proudly showing the baby around the ranch as soon as he was old enough to toddle alongside him. Grace eventually remarried, a kind widower who owned the neighboring ranch, and moved there with Joshua. Though they remained close, Sunday dinners continuing as a family tradition that never wavered. 3 years later, Clara and Colton welcomed twin daughters, Eleanor and Catherine, who grew to be as strong-willed and determined as their mother. Clara continued her medical practice, sometimes with a baby slung across her chest or toddlers playing quietly in a corner of her office while she treated patients. The Quinn Ranch prospered under Colton's careful management, expanding to include more land and a small vineyard that produced wine that became popular throughout California. Clara's medical practice grew as well, and she eventually trained a young woman from town as her assistant, passing on her knowledge and passion for healing. Through it all, their love remained the foundation of everything they built together. They weathered droughts and difficult harvests, medical emergencies, and the normal challenges of raising 3 active children on a working ranch. They celebrated triumphs large and small, from James's first solo ride to Eleanor and Catherine's dual graduation from the schoolhouse in town. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Colton took Clara back to the oak tree where he had first declared his love. The tree was fuller now, its branches spreading wide over the land, much like the love and family they had cultivated together. 20 years, Clara mused, her hand in his as they stood beneath the ancient oak. Gray streaked her once auburn hair now, and fine lines crinkled at the corners of her eyes when she smiled, but to Colton, she was as beautiful as the day they met. "The best 20 years of my life," he replied, bringing her hand to his lips. "Though I'm hoping for at least 20 more." Clara leaned into his embrace, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. "I never imagined, when that stagecoach was robbed and I found myself at your door, that it would lead to all of this." "I knew," Colton admitted with a smile. "Not right away, perhaps, but by the time you wrapped Joshua's arm and said he'd heal just fine, I think I was already falling in love with you." Clara looked up at him, her eyes soft with memory. "It was a broken arm that brought us together, and a heart that was waiting to be healed," Colton added, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Thank you for healing mine, Clara Quinn." "And thank you for healing mine," she whispered, standing on tiptoe to kiss him beneath the spreading branches of the oak tree. Their love as strong and enduring as the land they had made their home.